A soldier returned after 6 months of relentless duty on a misty, gunpowder-laced border. He didn't go home, but went straight to the elementary school where his young daughter studied every day. When he saw her slumped motionless in the empty classroom and the teacher whispering something close to her ear, the instinct that had kept him alive on the battlefield tapped out a silent warning. Something dirty was secretly clinging to his child. The clock read nearly 5 p.m. The gates of Oakwood Elementary remained ajar for children staying late for extra classes. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoed softly on the tiled floor. The military uniform bore traces of dirt along the cuffs, and the shoulder boards still displayed his rank. Lieutenant Daniel Vargas had returned from the border region after 6 months of service. Instead of heading home, he went directly to the elementary school, where his young daughter attended classes every day. In his hand, he carried a well-worn stuffed bunny with a floppy ear, a toy that Mia often left behind. He remembered her crying once because she couldn't sleep without it. He smiled faintly and continued walking. The hallway was deserted. No sounds of children's feet, no cheerful giggling. Everything seemed frozen in the light slanting through the windows, dividing the floor into alternating stripes of light and shadow. He reached the door of classroom 4B. It was slightly ajar. Through the gap between the door and the frame, Daniel saw his daughter. Mia was sitting at the back of the classroom, her small desk dwarfed by the neatly stacked rows of tables and chairs. Her head was bowed, her arms wrapped tightly around her elbows, her shoulders shaking slightly. Her hair fell on either side, obscuring her face. Next to her, a woman stood hunched over, Miss Holloway, her teacher. The sunlight streaming through the window cast her elongated shadow across the floor. Daniel could see clearly that she was whispering something close to his daughter's ear. Her hand rested on Mia's back. Daniel gently pushed the door open. The hinge creaked softly, like a sigh from a school too weary to warn anyone. Mia startled and looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her gaze was confused, tinged with fear. Then, as if an invisible switch had been flicked, she forced a smile. "Dad." Her voice was a whisper. Daniel hurried over. "What's wrong, honey? Is something the matter?" Mia shook her head immediately. "No, nothing's wrong. I'm just a little tired." The sound of low heels clicked a beat away. Miss Holloway stepped forward, smiling gently as if she'd just come from afternoon tea. "Little Mia is just a bit emotional. She missed her dad so much she was tearing up throughout math class. And then she struggled with a difficult problem and couldn't seem to solve it." She leaned down gently, her hand stroking Mia's back. "I was just comforting her." Daniel looked at her. The teacher appeared to be around 40, with softly styled brown hair and bright red lipstick. Her demeanor was flawless, her eyes filled with the confidence of someone who had been teaching for many years. But for a brief, fleeting moment, he saw that smile falter for a beat, like a mask slipping slightly, then instantly readjusted. He nodded, saying nothing more. He bent down and took Mia's hand. "Let's go home, sweetheart." Then, turning to Miss Holloway, "Thank you for looking after her." The little girl gripped his hand tightly, not with the usual joyful enthusiasm, but with the grip of someone swimming in deep water, and finally, touching something solid. Leaving the classroom, Daniel glanced back. Miss Holloway was still standing there, still smiling, but her eyes were no longer gentle. They were the eyes honed over years of controlling others with a soft voice and inscrutable gaze. On the way home, Daniel talked to his daughter. His voice was as light as a breeze through the forest, the way one speaks to a child recovering from a fever. "Dad's back now. Are you doing okay these days?" Mia nodded, her eyes fixed on the window. "I'm so happy you're back." Daniel narrowed his eyes. The little girl's gaze didn't meet his, but slid past him, as if afraid of touching something that would shatter. He placed his hand on her shoulder, stroking gently. Her body tensed for a fraction of a second, then relaxed. He asked no further questions. He'd been through ambushes in places cold to the bone. A soldier's intuition told him something was wrong, very wrong. That evening, Mia went to bed early. She curled up like a leaf, clutching the stuffed bunny to her chest. Daniel stood in the doorway, the light from the hallway casting a soft glow across his shoulders. He didn't enter, just watched. "Dad's back. You can rest easy." No one answered. Mia stirred, her lips moving in her sleep. Daniel watched the small form of his daughter in the bed. In his heart, the intuition that had saved him from mines, bullets, and deadly traps was tapping out slow, deliberate beats. She was lying, and his daughter was afraid of something he hadn't yet seen. 3 weeks before Daniel's return, the mornings in the second-floor apartment were always eerily quiet. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the old patterned rug. Clara, Mia's aunt, entered the small room, carrying a mug of warm milk. "Mia, wake up, sweetheart." Her voice was gentle. The 9-year-old lay facing the wall. There was no response. Clara placed her hand on her niece's shoulder, shaking her gently. Mia turned over, her eyes still swollen, the circles beneath them pale but distinct. She nodded without speaking, then quietly sat up. On the bed, the stuffed bunny lay tilted, one ear frayed almost to the point of tearing. Breakfast was simple: scrambled eggs and toast. Mia ate slowly, without fuss, but without any sign of hunger. Her eyes stared into the distance, as if mentally calculating something unsaid. Clara poured more milk, tentatively asking, "Is anything wrong at school, sweetie?" Mia looked up just for a moment, then shook her head. I just miss both Mom and Dad. I wish Mom was the one teaching me." Clara fell silent. For a fleeting moment, she saw the image of her deceased sister reflected in the child's eyes. Identical eyes, round, black, and always with a hint of lingering sadness. "Well, your mum would laugh to see you hugging that bunny like that," Clara said softly, trying to keep her voice cheerful. Mia didn't respond. As she prepared to leave, she stuffed the stuffed bunny into her backpack, quickly and discreetly. Clara saw it, but said nothing. In the car, Clara glanced in the rearview mirror. Mia leaned her head against the window, her hands wrapped around the backpack straps in front of her chest, as if trying to keep herself from dissolving. Clara opened her mouth to ask more, then stopped. Maybe it's just sensitive childhood stuff, she thought. At this age, it's easy to be sad, easily angered, easy to imagine things. Oakwood Elementary School, 7:25 a.m. The school hallway bustled with the sounds of shoes and children's laughter. Miss Holloway stood in front of the 4B classroom, wearing a light blue dress, low heels, and holding a clipboard. Her face bore a standard smile, the kind familiar to all parents. "Good morning, little Mia." Her voice was as sweet as molasses. Her hand placed on the girl's head, stroking it lightly as if patting a well-behaved cat. Mia bowed her head and silently entered the classroom. Clara watched from outside the gate, then turned the car around, feeling only a thin layer of mist covering her chest. But as soon as the parents had left, the classroom seemed to shift into a different reality. "Line up properly!" Holloway's voice was suddenly sharp, as brittle as rotten wood. "Whoever spilled the paint yesterday, step forward." The whole class fell silent. Mia walked slowly to her position, her eyes downcast. As she passed, Miss Holloway leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Walking as slow as your mother." "You're exactly like her." A finger with red nails lightly pinched Mia's left side, enough to make her flinch, not bruise, but sting, numbly. Math class, after 9 a.m. The whole class was working on a problem. Mia looked at the worksheet, the numbers blurring. She bit her lip, the pen in her hand motionless. As Miss Holloway passed, a long finger with a sharp red nail brushed lightly across the back of her neck, a silent warning. Mia shuddered, her whole body shrinking reflexively. Ms. Gomez, a student teacher who had been at the school for just over a month, sat at the back of the class observing. She saw Mia's flinch. The look in her eyes wasn't like being afraid of getting a bad grade. It was like being afraid of being touched. She took out her notebook and began writing a few short, discreet lines. In the afternoon, Clara arrived early to pick up Mia. She saw Mia waiting near a small row of trees, her backpack clutched close to her body, her eyes as still as water in a lake after rain. "Are you okay today?" Clara asked as the two got into the car. Mia nodded, not saying more. All the way home, the little girl just sat quietly, fiddling with the ear of the stuffed bunny, as if needing to hold on to something that wouldn't melt out of her eyes. Night fell. Mia slept in the small room, the nightlight glowing dimly. Clara went in to check on her, tucking the blanket back around her. She leaned down and gently stroked the child's hair, then stood up and turned away quickly. Outside the door, a thick stack of documents awaited her on the desk. The little girl stirred, muttering fragmented words in her sleep. "Mom, don't go. I'm good. I didn't do anything wrong." Clara stood silently in the doorway, still holding the highlighter she hadn't yet put down. Those vague words were like a thin crack in her chest. She stepped out of the room, closing the door. In the living room, the tea in Clara's hand grew cold. On the table, the laptop screen was still lit with a series of unanswered emails, unapproved documents. She sat down, her eyes facing the window, where the weak yellow streetlights cast shadows of sparse figures. "Is Mia okay? Or have I missed something?" She sighed softly, without an answer. She only knew that there was a feeling in her heart that was gritty, like a pebble stuck in her shoe. Not painful enough to stop, but enough to weigh her down all night. She loved her niece sincerely, but between work, life, and scattered fragments of responsibility, Clara could only care to this extent. And sometimes she wondered, was that enough? Wednesday noon. Art class. In classroom 4B, the midday sun streaming through the windows cast mottled patterns of watercolor on the desks. Each child was drawing freely according to the theme Dream House. Colorful strokes danced on the paper, mixed with giggles and the distinctive smell of glue. Mia sat still, the red crayon in her hand, not touching the paper. In front of her was a blank page. In the middle of the table, the water cup for rinsing brushes sat precariously. The little girl's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the brush. Her eyes were still staring at the paper, but the brush head veered to one side. The water cup tipped over. The sound was small, but in the quiet atmosphere, it sounded like a gunshot. Water spread out on the paper, down under the table. A few hisses rang out. One child said quietly, "It's Mia again. The teacher's going to get mad." Miss Holloway stood up from the teacher's desk. No scolding, no anger. She walked past, her expression unchanged. But as she walked behind Mia, she pulled hard on the little girl's hair with a terse sentence, just loud enough for two people to hear. "Brainless idiot. Just like your mother, even death leaves trouble behind." Mia didn't turn around, not saying a word, just biting her lip tightly. Soft whispers rang out from nearby tables. No one said it out loud, but the atmosphere became heavy. The two children sitting closest moved their chairs away, avoiding the spreading water stain, but their eyes didn't look at Mia. They looked at the teacher, then bowed their heads. Mia knew that. She always knew. Silence is sometimes more painful than ridicule. The small hand gripped the rag tightly, the damp cloth stained with red like blood. Mia's cheeks flushed, not because of shame, but because of the feeling that she was the only ink stain on a clean sheet of paper. Mia didn't cry. No one saw any tears. But in her heart, a door had just closed again, the door leading to where people believed her, or at least listened. In the corner of the class, a boy quietly watched. Aaron, 9 years old, quiet, but intelligent. He sat at a table near the window where the sunlight created a thin, golden streak. He didn't intend to look at Mia, but when he saw that little hand trembling, saw her mouth clenching until it bled something in Aaron suddenly moved. He glanced at Miss Holloway. She was still smiling, as if she had just said the gentlest thing in the world. The next morning, the Oakwood Elementary School infirmary was busier than usual. A group of students lined up for periodic height and weight measurements. Mia stood near the end. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the scale without looking at anyone. Her left wrist had a faint bruise, the size of the tip of her thumb, as if someone had gripped it tightly while pulling her arm. Nurse Anna, the school nurse, leaned down and saw the mark. "What happened here, Mia?" she asked gently. Mia paused. Her eyes flashed briefly. Then she repeated it like a reflex. "I fell while running." Anna asked no further questions. But when filling in the information in the table, she marked the avoidance reaction box and drew a small pencil stroke under the line, "Request further monitoring." Those were all the events that had happened before Daniel returned. Everyone around Mia saw that something was wrong, but no one had enough evidence to speak up. People chose to remain silent to observe further. But now that Daniel has returned, he will not let the truth sleep, and his daughter still have to suffer the psychological wounds. Early morning. The dew on the car windows hadn't completely melted away. Daniel Vargas sat in the car, his eyes following the gates of Oakwood Elementary. In the seat next to him, Mia sat quietly, her backpack clutched to her chest, avoiding eye contact. "Did you eat breakfast okay?" Daniel asked, turning down the volume on the radio. Mia nodded. "Do you want me to take you all the way to class?" This time, she shook her head. "It's okay. I can go in by myself." Daniel nodded slightly, but still followed his daughter's small steps with his eyes. When Mia disappeared behind the hallway, he didn't leave right away. His hand reached up and turned off the radio. Silence was the first language of a soldier observing. He got out of the car, pulling his baseball cap low. Simple, casual wear, a dark khaki jacket, jeans, soft-soled shoes, not standing out on the school grounds, but his eyes, as if still carrying the dust from the battlefield that hadn't been washed away. He crossed the yard, approaching the 4th grade classrooms. In the hallway between classrooms 4A and 4B, he saw Miss Holloway guiding some students to straighten their uniforms. Her voice was still sweet, her figure dignified. The parents passing by greeted her softly, some whispering in admiration. Daniel hid behind a pillar, observing without a word. A little girl accidentally dropped her pencil case. Mia bent down to help her friend. Holloway turned around, her eyes sharp. But as soon as she saw Daniel from afar, her expression softened as if there were a switch inside her chest. Daniel didn't approach. He only remembered, changing her expression in less than a second. Words and body out of sync. Standing posture like a soldier in training camp, tense and controlled. An hour later, Daniel found a way to visit the school's medical office. He knocked on the door, offering a polite smile. Nurse Anna was sorting paperwork. "Excuse me, I'm Daniel Vargas, Father of Mia in 4B. Anna nodded. Ah, yes. She's a very well-behaved girl. I'm stopping by to ask about the upcoming vaccinations, Daniel said, his voice even. And I also want to ask about something more personal. Nurse Anna looked up, her eyes a little wary. Daniel continued. Have you ever seen a bruise or anything unusual on Mia? Bruises, scratches, or strange marks? Silence. Just a few seconds, but heavy enough. I know Mia is a sensitive child, Anna said, lowering her voice, and I've also noticed a few things. Daniel sat down, leaning forward. What exactly? Can you tell me more clearly? Anna opened a drawer and pulled out a health tracking book. She opened it to Mia's name. Daniel saw 5 entries in the last 2 months. March 17th, scratch on right wrist, reason, fell. March 25th, bruise on left shoulder blade, reason, bumped into a friend while running. 4/3, redness around neck, suspected fingernails. 4/9, tired eyes, sleepy expression, weight loss. 4/12, bruise on left hand, faint marks, student said fell. I always ask carefully, but Mia only says, I fell. It's always the same. I marked it for follow-up, but... Anna sighed softly. The school only takes action when there is clear verification. No one acts without evidence. Miss Holloway is a key teacher. She's well liked. Do you think Mia is afraid of her? Daniel asked. Anna nodded. Slowly, surely. Yes, but she's very good at hiding it. Daniel left the office, his heart heavy, as if wearing stones around his chest. On the way home, he called Clara. Have you seen anything strange in Mia? Lately? The other end of the line hesitated. Why are you asking me that? Just tell me the truth. A few times I've seen her have nightmares, screaming. One night she screamed, "Don't pull me, don't hit me." I thought the little girl was missing my sister, missing her mother. Daniel didn't answer. His hand gripped the steering wheel, his eyes not leaving the asphalt road. Outside, a flock of birds flew up from the power lines, like a breakaway formation before a storm. That evening, he sat alone in the small study at home. The wooden table was neat, the desk lamp glowing dimly. In his hand was the leather-bound notebook he still used on missions, the habit of recording times, details, unusual signs. On the first page, he drew a timeline. March 17th, scratch. March 25th, bruise. April 3rd, red neck. April 9th, fatigue. April 12th, bruise. He turned the page, overwriting, all coincide with Holloway's class days. He circled Holloway's name in the center of a spiderweb diagram. Around it, he drew branches leading to Mia, physical marks, psychological signs, avoids, contact, defensive reflexes. Another branch, nurse matching records. Then a red arrow, further investigation, classmates. Daniel leaned back in his chair. His eyes were no longer the eyes of an ordinary father. They carried the gaze of a soldier who had observed the terrain before breaking through an encirclement. A soldier doesn't need guns, just need to know what is worth fighting for. And this time, the battlefield was a classroom. The enemy was not wearing a uniform, not holding a gun, but knew how to hide in deadly sweetness. Daniel closed the notebook. Tomorrow morning, he would return to school, not to pick up and drop off, but to begin turning over the ground beneath the teacher's heels. Recess, the Oakwood Elementary schoolyard, sparkled with sunlight. While the children poured out like young birds released from their cages, Aaron remained sitting on the stone bench under the shade of the phoenix tree. His satchel placed beside him, he held a math book but didn't read, his eyes only fixed on the hallway, where Mia was sitting huddled on the steps. The little girl hugged her knees, her chin resting on her hands. The wind stirred the stray hair on her cheek, her eyes staring into the distance, not looking at anything, but as if she were far away from this place. Aaron stood up and slowly walked over, sitting down next to Mia. He opened his mouth to say something, the first sentence, after many weeks of just observing. But Mia turned to him, pursing her lips and bowing her head, like a reflex that had been well learned. Aaron stopped, his hand clenched into a fist. Just then, Miss Holloway stepped out of the hallway, high heels tapping lightly on the tile floor, her face made up just right, her gentle smile ready as if it had a button. She leaned down, stroking Mia's head in a fake way, like a loving mother. But Aaron heard the whisper that was hissed from between her teeth, pretending to be so pathetic. "Just you wait." Aaron's hand under the table clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. That evening, Aaron's bedroom was lit only by the light from a small desk lamp. Beside him was an unfinished soda can and a few unassembled Lego pieces. The boy sat quietly at his desk, taking out an old black phone from his desk, a phone without a SIM, only using Wi-Fi and recording. Aaron opened the recording. His finger pressed play. A sound rang out. A woman's voice, cold, restrained. "You are a disgrace to your father, understand?" Next was a soft sob, short, trembling of Mia. He didn't shudder, but the headphones were still plugged deep into his little ears. On the other hand, Aaron opened Word on his laptop and began typing file 1 Mia_1.wave, contents, excerpt Holloway, insulting Mia. Time, Monday, lesson 2, math. Location, classroom 4, B, right corner of the back row of tables. Note, Mia recoiled, her face pale. He saved the file, carefully copying it to a small blue USB. He didn't know what to do next, just knew this needed to be saved. The living room was still lit. Aaron's mother was on a work phone call, her laptop open with many Excel sheets. He peeked at her through the doorway for a moment, then quietly closed the door, saying nothing. The next morning, during art class, Aaron sat alone at a back table. He didn't assemble a model like the other students, but just fiddled with a piece of scratch paper. The paper was crumpled, with a few scribbled words, Mia Holloway audio proof. He planned to put it away, but while fumbling for his pencil case, the paper fell to the floor without him knowing. Ms. Gomez, the student teacher, was checking each table. She bent down to pick up the paper, intending to return it to the student who dropped it, but her eyes stopped when she read the words on it. Her eyes swept across the class, then stopped at Aaron. The boy looked up, and in that moment, they both understood something had begun. After school, Ms. Gomez knocked on the door of the library, where Aaron was reading a book. She walked in lightly, not carrying a clipboard, only a notebook and the USB that the boy had left on his desk when he left. "You're Aaron," she called softly. The boy turned around. "I found this." She placed the USB on the table. "And I read that piece of paper too." Aaron bowed his head, but didn't deny it. After a moment, he nodded. Ms. Gomez sat down, her eyes serious but not judgmental. "You know something about Mia, don't you?" Aaron took the headphones from his backpack and connected the USB to her laptop. "I recorded it when she thought no one could hear." She looked at the boy for a long moment. His big eyes behind the thin glasses revealed tension, but not panic. It was just the first time a child had found a way to fight the wrong. She took the USB. "You did a good job, Aaron." That evening, the small apartment where Ms. Gomez rented a room was lit only by the laptop screen. She plugged in her headphones and turned on the audio file. Her finger rested on the touchpad, but didn't move. Holloway's icy voice rang out. "You stupid kid. You're embarrassing your father." She paused, taking a deep breath. The next sound was trembling. It wasn't clear who it was from, as if what was ringing out wasn't just a voice, but the entire obsession that a 9-year-old was struggling to endure. She pulled out the headphones. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes were no longer vague. Part of the truth had escaped the screen of lies. It wasn't enough to convict, but enough to start a breaking down. Oakwood Elementary School. After school hours became deserted, Ms. Gomez stood in front of the medical office door. In her hand was a small USB wrapped in tissue paper. She had hesitated all afternoon, but finally decided to knock. Inside, Nurse Anna was sorting medical records for the weekend. Gomez walked in, quietly as if carrying a discreet wind. "I need you to hear this." Anna looked up, her eyes not surprised, just sunken. The two women sat opposite each other. Gomez plugged the USB into the medical laptop and opened the file. Not saying a word. Holloway's voice rang out. Gomez turned it off immediately after that sentence. "The student who gave me this section is named Aaron. He recorded it twice." Anna sat still. After a long moment, she spoke. "I know something's wrong. Not just today, but I don't have anything specific. Until now." She stood up, opened the file cabinet, pulled out the medical book, and placed it on the table. "Here are all the notes about Mia. Every bruise, every sign of avoidance. I marked it. I reported it, but no one did anything." Gomez looked at the book, then looked up. "We can't let a child face this alone." Anna nodded softly. "So we need someone who believes us. Someone tough enough to pull the truth into the light." She looked at Gomez. "We need Daniel." The next afternoon, a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town. By the large glass window, the setting sun streamed through the bamboo blinds, casting shadows on the wooden table. Daniel Vargas sat waiting, shirt sleeves rolled up, notebook placed in front of him. He had read it 3 times, but still flipped through the first page, then back to the end. The doorbell rang. Clara stepped in first, her hand holding the zipper of her purse, her eyes full of hesitation. Following her were Ms. Gomez and Nurse Anna. They sat down, not ordering water. No need for an introduction. Clara spoke first, her voice choked. "I've seen Mia acting strange for a long time, but I didn't know what to do. I just thought the little girl missed my sister, missed her mother." Daniel shook his head. "You're not the only one." He looked directly into their eyes one by one, then said, "I used to face enemies on the battlefield, but I won't accept letting the one standing behind my child go." Gomez took out the USB. "Here is the recording." Miss Holloway's voice is clear. Anna opened the medical book, comparing. All the times Mia was injured coincided with her classes. Clara bowed her head. Some nights, Mia screamed in her sleep. She said, "Don't pull me." "I don't understand." Daniel opened the notebook. The middle page was the spider web diagram he had drawn from the day before. In the center was the name Holloway, surrounded by small branches. Bruises, avoidance, anonymous words, recording psychological signs. He drew another branch. Gomez, eyewitness testimony. Anna, medical records. Clara, psychological behavior at home. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have a behavioral pattern. But, Anna hesitated, if we give it to the principal now, they will cover it up for her. Miss Holloway has a good relationship with the parents on the board. So we need to go further, Daniel said. The atmosphere in the coffee shop sank. Everyone understood that what they were about to do could lead to a fierce reaction. But that atmosphere also carried the feeling of someone standing on the right side for the first time. Gomez clenched her hand. I've contacted a lawyer from a child protection organization. If there is evidence and medical confirmation, they can force the school to open an independent investigation. Need more stories from students, Anna said. I have a child who said they didn't want to sit near Mia because Miss Holloway often scolds the little girl. They can testify." Daniel nodded. "I'll take care of that." Before parting, the four sat for a few more minutes in silence. Clara looked at Daniel, her voice small. "You're not mad at me, are you?" For not doing anything sooner, Daniel looked at his sister-in-law, his eyes not soft, but his voice less steely. "We're doing it, and that's what matters." That evening at home, Daniel reopened his notebook. On the first page, he wrote a large line, in bold, "The truth is no longer silent." Then he turned to a new page, drawing a plan. Step 1. Gather complete evidence. Step 2. Contact a lawyer. Step 3. Send the file not through the principal, but directly to the Board of Education and Child Protection Agency. He underlined each step, then closed the notebook. Standing up, walking towards Mia's room. The door to the child's room was ajar, the nightlight casting a gentle glow. Mia was sleeping, hugging the stuffed bunny. Her eyelids were still twitching slightly, as if she hadn't finished her dream. Daniel stood silently for a long moment, whispering, "I promise, no one can hurt you again this time." Tomorrow morning, he would return to school, not as a father picking up his daughter, but as someone who had stepped through war, and this time, he would win. Tuesday morning. The gentle sunlight shone down on the schoolyard. The school gates were still crowded as usual, but there was something a little different in the atmosphere. A small underground movement like the smoldering undercurrent beneath the ice. Daniel Vargas stepped out of the car, opening the passenger seat for Mia. The little girl was still silent, but when she got out of the car, her eyes slowly looked around, as if sensing the change that she herself had not yet defined. He leaned down to adjust the straps of her backpack, whispering, "Dad will stay for a bit. Meet your teacher." Mia looked up, worry flashing in her eyes, but then she nodded softly, not asking anything more. Daniel squeezed his daughter's shoulder lightly, then watched her disappear behind the hallway. He walked slowly towards the principal's office. His eyes stopped at every detail, the class nameplates, the stone benches, the security cameras in the corner of the wall. Not a single detail was missed. At the office, he knocked on the door, entering with a gentle smile. "Hello, I'm Daniel Vargas, the parent of Mia in class 4B. The secretary looked up, a little surprised at the calm but clear demeanor of the man. Daniel continued, "I would like to schedule a meeting with the principal. There are a few things I want to discuss." "Yes, let me check her schedule." The secretary opened the computer, clumsily. Daniel was still smiling, but his eyes didn't leave the screen she was looking at. "It's not urgent, as long as I can talk to her in private, and at the right time." In classroom 4B, the morning began with a geography lesson. Mia sat at the back of the table as usual, but her posture was a little different today. She still bowed her head, but her back was no longer hunched over the table. Her hands were no longer clenched as usual. Ms. Gomez sat behind the class, observing. Her eyes followed Mia's every small movement, how she lifted her head to listen to the lecture for a few seconds, how she wrote slowly, but didn't stop in the middle, and most importantly, there was no longer the fearful look as in previous days. Outside the class, Miss Holloway lectured and glanced at the hallway window. Daniel Vargas was standing there, not doing anything. Just standing, leaning against the wooden railing, his eyes looking straight into the class, as calm as a father waiting for his child to get out of school, but also like someone who had ambushed, waiting for his prey to appear. Holloway paused slightly in her words, but immediately smiled. "Children, who knows what country the Nile River flows through?" Her voice was still sweet, but in her eyes, a shadow had just crept into the corner of her eye. Lunchtime. Students rushed out of class. Mia, as usual, took her lunchbox to a table near the window, the place she usually chose to sit alone. Ms. Gomez walked over, holding her lunchbox, and sat next to her. "This place still has beautiful sunshine, huh?" she said softly, her voice as if it was just about the weather. Mia nodded softly. A moment later, while opening the lunchbox, Gomez whispered enough for only Mia to hear. "Someone is standing on your side." Not everyone believes her. Mia paused. Her hand stopped in midair. Slowly, she turned to look at Gomez. Her eyes still had a look of suspicion, but for the first time, a very small light flashed. A look like seeing a door opening, even if she wasn't sure if she could step through. Late in the afternoon, Daniel walked slowly through the hallway, pretending to return to the principal's office, with the reason, forgetting his wallet. He smiled politely with the secretary and turned in the opposite direction. While passing the meeting room in the back, he softly dropped the bunch of keys to the floor so naturally that no one realized it was intentional. At that moment, the door of meeting room 2 opened a small crack. From inside, a voice rang out, small and quick as a whisper, but sharp as a thin blade. "He's up to something. If the kids start talking a lot, I'll grab each one by the throat." Holloway's voice. Unmistakable. No longer the light sweetness to woo adults, but something cold and dry, like concrete that wasn't completely dry. Daniel paused for a moment, still holding the posture of bending down to pick up the keys. His thumb silently swiped the back of the phone, a familiar operation to open the recording mode with the shortcut he had set since he was a soldier. He moved closer to the wall, as if accidentally leaning his shoulder to rest. His ear tilted towards the door, his eyes looking towards the hallway in front to maintain a natural look. From inside, Holloway's voice continued, still in a low voice, but clear, every word. "They're kids. Who would believe them? And if any child dares to speak out, I have a way. Their parents are busy making money. No one has time to turn over my words." Silence for a moment. The sound of a pen turning, the sound of a chair squeaking lightly. They have to be scared, have to know to keep their mouths shut. Children as weak as Mia are the easiest to control. Daniel squeezed the strap of his bag lightly. In his head, those sounds were fitting together piece by piece with the wounds, both visible and invisible, that his daughter had carried for the past 2 months. He took a step back, pretending as if he had just realized something, tapped his forehead lightly, and then turned and walked away. His hand turned off the recording, saved the file, and sent it directly to his personal email for backup. A thin smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. The tape was short, not longer than a minute, but long enough to reveal the nature of a person hiding a knife behind red lipstick, enough to extinguish all sweet denials, and most importantly, enough so that Mia, Aaron, and the other children no longer had to be afraid in silence. That evening at home, Daniel sent the recording to a private chat group of 3 people, Anna, Gomez, and Clara. The accompanying message, "Holloway just made a call. I got a recording. A voice threatening students. No names anyone specifically, but the context is clear." Gomez responded first. "I will send it to the supplementary file. If the principal tries to cover it up, we need someone higher up." Anna continued, "Someone I know in the Department of Education. I can send a summary, unofficially. They will keep it a secret if we ask." Daniel opened the computer. On the screen was the PDF file that was gradually being completed. Title: Report of Psychological Abuse, Class 4, B, Holloway attached, recording from student Aaron. Recording from the hallway, notes from the medical book, Analysis of Student Behavior, by Gomez. Observations at home, Clara. Notes on reflexes, questions from the parent, Daniel. Gomez sent another line. "I'll print it out tomorrow morning. If the principal doesn't sign, we'll send it straight to the department." Daniel looked at the screen for a long time. He knew it wasn't enough to bring Holloway to justice, but enough to open the first door in the darkness. At lunchtime the next day, the school canteen was buzzing as usual. Tables and chairs were arranged in groups. Students gathered in familiar groups. But in a far corner, where the light from the window shone obliquely, Mia still sat alone with her small lunchbox. Aaron appeared, holding his tray of food. He walked slowly, quietly sitting down opposite her. Mia looked up, stunned. She was used to being alone. Even the light often avoided the place where she sat. Aaron didn't speak right away. He opened the milk carton, took a breath, then said softly, "I heard yesterday. She said you were stupid. But I don't think you're stupid. I recorded it too." Mia didn't respond, but the hand holding the chopsticks stopped trembling. She looked at Aaron, longer than usual. It wasn't a nod or a smile. But the silence today no longer carried the meaning of fear. It was like a sigh, small and light, but for the first time, allowed to be breathed out. That afternoon, Ms. Gomez was supervising the school grounds when Sophie, a student in Class 5A, shyly approached. "Ms. Gomez, I used to study in Miss Holloway's class last year." Gomez leaned down gently. "Yes, I remember you. What's wrong, Sophie?" Sophie looked down at her pink ballet shoes. Her hands grasped the corner of her shirt. She used to call me fat, said I was useless, in front of my friends." Gomez didn't respond right away. She placed her hand on the little girl's shoulder. "Do you want to tell me more clearly? Have your mum or dad there? I can ask for permission to record it, to protect what you say." Sophie hesitated. If I say it, won't my mum be angry?" Gomez smiled. "I'm sure your mum will be proud." That evening, at a small tea shop near the park, Daniel Vargas met 4 other parents. They were the ones who had read the anonymous post that appeared on the Oakwood School Parents Forum in the morning, with the title, "Do you really know who is teaching your child every day?" One of them was Mr. Harry, father of Carrick in Class 4B. He sat up straight, his face serious. "My little guy has been in Holloway's class since the beginning of the year. After a few months, he started wetting the bed every night. At first, I thought he was stressed about something else, but he always avoided questions about class." Another mother, Ms. Lickey, said, "My little girl was forced to stand for the whole lesson for writing the wrong name of a river. She used to say, 'Miss Holloway doesn't like me,' but I didn't pay attention." Daniel nodded. "If you agree, I will compile the stories, not giving out the names of the children, just recording the parents' words. Each person, a story but put together. It will be a big map." They gave messages, photos of bruises, recordings of children telling stories in trembling voices. Daniel collected everything, without changing his expression, but his eyes became sharper. The next morning, the school medical office received 3 requests for private meetings from parents with the same content. Want to verify teacher behavior. Ms. Gomez received 4 emails from former students recounting how Miss Holloway had scolded, humiliated, or punished unusually. One student in grade 6, who is now in secondary school, sent a message. "I will never forget the way she looked at me, as if I was a mistake, not a person." At the same time, in the principal's office, the atmosphere was solidifying like a layer of dust that hadn't been cleaned for a long time. Principal Morton placed the file on the table. In front of him was Miss Holloway, still wearing a light purple vest, her hair neatly tied up, but her forehead was covered with sweat. "Miss Holloway, I have received feedback from many sources about how you communicate with students. Do you have anything to say before we open the evidence hearing?" Holloway smiled lightly. The principal knows. Children are easily agitated. I'm always serious, but with love. There is a recording, Morton interrupted. I've listened to it. Holloway's face froze for a moment. Morton didn't say anything else, just pushed the file back. The council will hold an internal meeting on Friday. For the time being, you're required to stop teaching directly. This is not a disciplinary measure. It is just a temporary step in the verification process. That afternoon, the parking lot behind the school was deserted. The door of the silver car slammed against the body when Holloway got in. She threw her purse on the passenger seat, her hands shaking. You bastards! You dare— She slammed the steering wheel hard. Her face could no longer maintain a smile. For the first time in 7 years of teaching here, she felt scared. In Daniel's small apartment, he, Gomez, and Anna, together with Clara, sat around the table. The file was almost complete. Daniel struck out a final line. Every child carries a voice within them. The job of adults is to listen and not let them have to scream in despair. The hearing District 17, Board of Education, Oakwood Elementary School conference room. The room was simply decorated, a long rectangular table in the middle, 2 rows of chairs facing each other, white fluorescent lights quietly illuminating the faces that were keeping calm by gripping their hands under the table. On the wall, the logo of the Department of Education was quietly present, like a watchful eye. Daniel Vargas sat on the left side, the parents' and witnesses' side. Next to him was Clara, her hand gripping the edge of the chair tightly. Ms. Gomez and Nurse Anna were also present, each carrying a stack of carefully marked documents. Opposite, Miss Holloway appeared on time. A beige vest, a simple skirt, her smile still intact as when she was standing in class. But under her eyes were newly appeared dark circles, and her fingers were constantly intertwined. Next to her was the school lawyer, Mr. Reuben Marks, who was taciturn but had sharp eyes. Principal Morton was the one who started. He cleared his throat, then read a short opening statement, emphasizing that this was an internal hearing, not a court, but it could lead to the highest discipline for faculty members. Miss Holloway, he said, before us are serious documents, with many sources of verification from parents, teachers, and school medical staff. Do you have anything to present before we open the evidence hearing? Miss Holloway stood up. Her figure was still straight. Her eyes swept lightly around the room, her voice slow. I do not deny that I am strict in teaching. Children today lack discipline, and I only do what is necessary to train them to become people. A parent, Miss Lilly, jumped up. You call my child useless, right in the middle of class. He went home and locked himself in his room for 3 days. Is that training? The principal raised his hand to signal order, but no one could keep calm anymore. You pinched my child's hand until it bruised, said his mother was irresponsible and mediocre in front of his friends, another father said. Daniel opened his notebook, pushing the USB towards the council. Here is a recording from a student in her class. Miss Holloway's voice is clear, calling a little girl a disgrace to her father, accompanied by the sound of her crying. Lawyer Marks interjected, recording is not allowed in class without consent. Gomez raised her head. Children have the right to be protected, and when adults don't listen, they have the right to speak in any way. Anna gave out the medical record. Below are 8 cases of minor injuries, accompanied by abnormal psychological reactions from a single student. All coincide with Miss Holloway's classes. Clara placed her hand on her chest. The little girl called out to her mother in her dream, said, "Don't pull me." I thought she was dreaming of her deceased mother. But now I know. She didn't dream. She remembered. Each person a word, each person an evidence. On the council side, the members began to murmur. A member of the Human Resources Review Board tapped a pen on the table, his eyes cautious. We have consulted the education law and faculty regulations. Repeated behavior that causes psychological or physical harm to students, whether indirect or direct, is considered school abuse. Miss Holloway still maintained a cold expression. But when asked, "Can you explain why 3 students have avoided you, and why your former students also described similar experiences?" She was silent. 1 minute, 2 minutes, not a word. Daniel sat still, but his eyes were no longer angry. They just quietly watched. In his heart, he knew this battle didn't need weapons. The truth, once spoken, would open its own path. At the end of the hearing, Principal Morton announced, "Based on the evidence, witnesses and conclusions of the Faculty Behavior Review Board, Miss Holloway will be terminated from her teaching contract, effective immediately. The file will be forwarded to the Department of Education for further consideration of professional action throughout the district." Miss Holloway didn't argue. Also, didn't cry, just stood up, picked up her bag, and walked out of the room. The door closed behind her lightly, but sounding like the end of something that had lasted too long. The summer that year came early, gently, like a warm breeze crawling over the threshold. Oakwood Elementary School, after the turmoil, had now returned to its familiar rhythm. The sound of drums, laughter, the smell of notebooks and glue faintly mixed in the air. But in classroom 4B, something had changed, not the tables and chairs, not the phoenix tree in the yard, but the way the children looked at each other. Mia walked into class this morning with a brand new butterfly hairpin. Her pretty little backpack, printed with a white bunny, swayed with her steps. She no longer walked fast as if afraid of being late, nor did she bow her head as if afraid of someone seeing her. Mia walked slowly, just enough to hear the sound of her shoes touching the classroom floor, as if confirming that she really belonged to this place. Inside the class, Aaron was already sitting at a table near the window. When he saw Mia, he waved softly, not too enthusiastic, nor forced just a simple, silent greeting that was enough to make the little girl's eyes light up a little. Mia sat down in her chair, opened her pencil case, and prepared for the new lesson. Her shoulders were no longer hunched over. The small hands still had calluses from the times she had gripped the rag too tightly, but today they were holding a pen, not trembling. Ms. Gomez walked in, placing a stack of math books on the table. Her voice was as light as the morning sun. "We will do a small math problem to start the week, okay?" The whole class said yes, in unison, and for the first time in a semester, Mia also raised her voice. Small, but clear. "Yes." Ms. Gomez paused for a moment, then gave a warm smile. In the afternoon, when the dismissal bell rang, Daniel stood at the school gate, his hands in his pockets, shirt sleeves rolled up, his eyes fixed on the classroom. He no longer hid under a baseball cap or a military jacket. Today, he was a father like any other father, but in his heart, he still carried a belief tempered by wind and frost. His daughter had found a part of her own light again. Mia ran towards him, not too fast, but her eyes no longer avoided. When she got close, she looked up, saying in a natural voice, "Today my class did a quiz. I got a high score." Daniel bent down, took his daughter's hand, and smiled. "I knew you could do it." The two fathers and daughters walked towards the car. Clara stood waiting there, holding a bag of bread just bought from a shop near the house. She handed one to Mia. "Strawberry jam toast. You said you were craving it yesterday," Auntie remembered, so she stopped by to buy it. Mia took it, took a small bite, then looked up and said softly, "Thank you, Auntie." Clara looked at her niece, her eyes no longer grey and opaque, but beginning to have softer shades. She nodded, gently, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. That evening, the family's small apartment was lit up warmly. Daniel cooked in the kitchen, the spaghetti that Mia used to love when her mother was alive. Clara set the table. Mia sat in a high chair, doing her homework, occasionally glancing into the kitchen to ask, "Did you put too many onions in it?" Daniel shouted from the kitchen. "I tasted it. It's not spicy." Clara laughed. "And if it's spicy, just add more cheese. Our kitchen always has cheese, remember?" Mia nodded, folded her book, and ran into the kitchen to help sprinkle herbs on the plate. When the three sat around the table, the sound of knives and spoons and laughter mixed together, small but real. Daniel watched his daughter eat happily, his heart warming as if after a storm. Every small gesture of Mia's, the fact that she dared to comment on the food, dared to raise her hand in class, dared to walk slowly in the schoolyard without being afraid of being seen, all were small steps leading towards the light. That Saturday, the whole family went to the park near the lake. Daniel brought an old camera. Clara prepared sandwiches. Mia rode her newly repaired bike. Other children ran around the grassy hill. And for the first time in months, Mia joined in when a little girl named Lily asked, "Do you want to play soccer?" Mia nodded. Clara looked at Daniel, whispering, "She's gradually coming back, right?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He just raised the camera, taking a picture of his daughter, kicking the small ball, her hair blowing in the wind, smiling broadly with her friends. Yes, she's coming back, but this time with a protective fence around her. At noon, back home, Mia snuggled into Clara's arms, whispering, "I miss Mom. But now I'm not afraid of dreaming anymore." Clara stroked the little girl's hair. Daniel stepped out of the kitchen, heard it, but didn't interrupt, just quietly stood there. "Because now, when I wake up, I know Dad and Auntie are still here," Mia continued. Daniel sat down, placing his hand on his daughter's shoulder, warm and sure. "And you are here too. Strong. Really." That evening, before going to sleep, Mia opened the drawer and took out the old stuffed bunny. The ear was still frayed, but sewn back neatly. The little girl placed it next to her, climbed into bed and said softly, "Today, I don't need to hug you to sleep." Clara stood at the door, silenced for a moment. Daniel walked over, kissing his daughter on the forehead. "You've grown up a little more." Mia closed her eyes, mumbling, "I don't want to grow up too fast. Just want to live for real." The nightlight dimmed. The room became quiet. Outside in the living room, Daniel sat writing in his notebook. June. Clear sky. Mia doesn't say "I'm afraid" anymore, not because she forgot the fear, but because she knows she is not alone. He put down his pen, closed the notebook. In his heart, the battlefield had retreated, and what remained was a home, a gentle sunlight, and a child who was learning how to smile again. Daniel and Mia's story is not just a journey to expose a bully, but also the journey of a father learning to listen in silence and to stand up at the right time. Sometimes, to save a child, you don't need to shout loudly. Just need someone patient enough to look deep into their eyes and brave enough to believe that. They are not making up their pain. No one is born ready to protect someone from harm. But perhaps the important thing is not that we know what to do, but that we have enough love not to turn away. What do you think of this ending? If you were Daniel, would you have done it differently? Have you ever doubted your own intuition and then regretted it? And if you, or someone you know, is carrying something unsaid, please remember, no one should have to suffer alone. I am here, reading every comment, and I am listening, really,